A final push for a deal in the last few hours of the COP29 summit. Delegates in Baku, Azerbaijan, are proposing a new text that proposes developed nations provide $250 billion annually by 2035. It marks the first time a concrete amount specifying how much wealthy nations should contribute has been issued. The draft also set the broader goal to raise the $1.3 trillion previously demanded by developing nations at the summit. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries have been struggling to agree on a new target to replace the former $100 billion pledge. Host Azerbaijan has urged all parties to bridge their differences, while China called on all parties to meet halfway to strike a deal on the financing issue. But the grueling 2-week-long conference is nowhere near its end and could run into overtime if a final deal isn't reached. Now, for more, we're now joined by our climate correspondent, Jack Bort, from Bangkok, and our reporter, Claudia Lim, on the ground in Baku. It's good to see you both. Jack, let's start with you. Talk us through the latest draft. Have delegates addressed the main sticking points?
Yeah, you've just mentioned some of those numbers. There are two really key numbers that we've just heard and we've just seen in the draft text released just a short time ago. Now, one is $1.3 trillion. This has been floating around for more than a week now. The draft text, as it stands now, calls on all actors to try and mobilize this amount of climate finance for developing countries every year by 2035. And that would be coming from public and private sources. Now, the new number, as you mentioned, is this $250 billion. Now, this is important because it would replace the current goal that exists right now of $100 billion. And it would, call on, developed countries to take the lead to generate this kind of money for developing countries. Now, will it be enough? Will developing countries actually get on board and agree to something like this? Those are the hanging questions right now. Also, who would contribute to the fund? Which countries would be putting the money in and in what form? The text right now suggests, it invites rather, some developing parties to also contribute. So that could include China and Saudi Arabia. But what is key here is developing countries don't want to take on more loans. They don't want to be indebted by taking the type of climate action that they require.
Moving forward, Jack, is the world now on track to meet the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement?
That's a big and difficult question to answer, but look, probably not. And I think that's why there's so much pressure on negotiators in Baku right now. If you look at climate science, scientists are telling us that the world is in much worse shape than it was just 12 months ago. And within climate circles, what we often hear is the phrase, keeping Paris alive, making sure that this very important climate framework is actually viable. But is it going forward? All of it is centered around this 1.5 degree goal, keeping global warming in check. That's what all of this is for. We already have experts saying that that's probably impossible to achieve, even if countries do remain very ambitious. Look around the world at what's happening. We've seen global temperatures have continued to rise. Heat records have been broken in some 19 countries this year, including in Southeast Asia. We have record surface and ocean temperatures. We have more carbon dioxide, more methane in the atmosphere than a year ago. Fossil fuel production has continued to rise. And then just look at the direct damage from extreme impacts that have been made worse by climate change. So plenty of reasons really for negotiators and governments to come together and make sure that this COP29 summit is a success.
All right, thanks for that, Jack. Claudia, let's bring you in here. You've been there for the past 10 days. What has Singapore achieved at this COP?
Well, COP29 is ending, but negotiations is not. So Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu is co-facilitating Article 6 negotiations of the Paris Agreement. And that's essentially, carbon credit trading to get businesses or governments to offset their carbon emissions. And she said that there has been significant progress on that front. But then the conversation surrounding climate financing has been really hard because many countries are tight on finances post-COVID. But however, the energy is still positive at the negotiating table because there are many parties still leaning forward to try to seek solutions. So you can see that there are many people still trying to, push for climate action and coming in with the right mindset. But apart from negotiations, there's also a lot of buzz at the Singapore Pavilion. Over the past 10 days, there's been over 9,000 visitors, and that's 50% more visitors than they had last year. So at the Singapore Pavilion, there has also been many key announcements made there. For example, Singapore's contribution to climate financing, moving Asia away from coal plants and into renewable energy, and also other announcements to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors like steel and cement, and also in areas like healthcare with high emissions. So the visitors to the pavilion will also showcase many of Singapore's green thinking. For example, beer made from recycled water, and also many of the little things that businesses and individuals are doing, and activists as well. So I spoke to some Singaporeans, youth and businesses on some of the takeaways they had this COP.
This is, my 5th COP, and every year I find that I really build relationship and also build knowledge, because Singapore is a small country and we are very committed to climate action, but we need to reach out, to the world to look at what are the best practices and to build relationship, and collaborations is very important.
My learning from this COP, as well as from meeting other youth delegates, is that they're very in touch with nature, and that's why they're so energized to drive action. They face these impacts at the forefront. So to me, it's important to also highlight that message to other youths and make them understand the importance and urgency of doing climate action right now.
All right, thanks, Bo, for the latest updates on COP29. That was our climate change climate correspondent Jack Board from Bangkok and our reporter Claudia Lim on the ground in Baku. Thank you.